If stories about broken families slowly stitching themselves back together in tiny, ordinary moments make your heart ache in a good way, stay with this one until the end. And if Grace, Maddie, Ivy, Isla, and Elliot's journey touches something in you, please like this video and subscribe so you don't miss the next slow, healing story on this channel. By the time the ninth nanny quit, Elliot Kane could feel the building watching him. Kane Tower rose over Manhattan like a sheet of glass, all mirrored sky and perfect angles. Inside it, people moved quickly with purpose. Deals were made, futures decided. The whole machine hummed because he kept it humming, except for the one place he could not make behave. The daycare on the 12th floor was supposed to be a perk. Family-friendly, the brochure said. On-site childcare for our most valuable assets. Now the double doors banged open. The nanny's heels clicked down the polished hall like gunshots. "I'm done," she said, thrusting her ID badge at the receptionist. "They are unmanageable." Her lipstick was smudged. One sleeve bore the faint outline of a small, sticky handprint. Her expression was tight, just this side of tears. "They're three," Elliot said. His voice came out too calm. "They're grieving." "They're monsters," she snapped. "Little rich monsters. I'm not paid enough for this." She turned on her heel and left before he could answer. Silence fell behind her like a curtain. Through the daycare window he could see them, pressed together in the corner of the reading nook. Ivy's small shoulder against Isla's. Twin curls tangled. One clutched a stuffed fox by the tail. The other stared at the door the nanny had just stormed through. They did not cry. They did not call after her. They just folded in on themselves, as if absorbing another abandonment into the tally. Elliot's chest tightened. When his wife died, people had said the same things to him, over and over. "Time will help. Kids are resilient. You'll figure it out." No one mentioned what it felt like to watch your daughters learn, before they could read their own names, that adults could leave with no warning. "You're scaring the staff," a cool voice said behind him. He didn't need to turn to know it was her. "Celeste," he said. His aunt stepped closer, her reflection sliding into his in the glass. Perfect hair, impeccable suit, not a crease out of place. "Investors talk. You know," she said. "Whispers make their way upstairs. The Kane twins lost another nanny. Is everything all right at the top?" "They're three," he said, again, more to himself at this time. "They're not a PR risk. They're children." She smiled without warmth. "In this city," she said, "everything is a PR risk." He watched Ivy reach for Isla's hand. Isla let her, then twisted the fox's tail so hard it seemed strained. He wanted to go in, to scoop them up, hold them, tell them he wasn't going anywhere. But there was a board call in 15 minutes. A portfolio review. 1,000 people whose paychecks depended on him not walking into that room with graham cracker dust on his shirt. Celeste sighed. "If you don't get this under control," she said, "a judge may start to wonder if you're capable of providing a stable environment. Guardianship can be adjusted." "Elliot," blood runs deeper than sentiment. He stiffened. "You're their aunt," he said, "not their mother." "I am the only other adult in this family who knows how to maintain a standard," she replied. "Don't make me prove it in court." She walked away, heels the same precise tempo as the nannies, but somehow heavier. Inside the daycare, Ivy laid her head on Isla's shoulder. Isla stared straight ahead. Elliot felt like he was standing on a fault line. Grace Nolan did not belong in glass towers. She belonged, if you believe the life she grew up in places with flickering fluorescent lights, in dented metal chairs and ashtrays that never got emptied. She had worked hard to climb from those rooms into better ones. Not shinier ones, just steadier. The janitor's closet on the 7th floor of Kane Tower was not glamorous, but it was hers. The mop, the cart, the smell of lemon cleaner and cheap soap, the printed schedule with her name on it. It was, on most days, enough. Her daughter was the reason. Maddie, 5 years old, freckled, with the same stubborn chin Grace saw in the mirror every morning. Maddie, who laughed with her whole body. Maddie, who clung to Grace's hand on the subway each morning and chattered about her day at the neighborhood daycare. "Do you clean the whole building?" Mommy Maddie had asked once, eyes wide. "Just the parts that need me," Grace had replied. Today, the map on her cart said 12th floor, afternoon rotation. She pushed the cart out of the elevator. The hallway smelled faintly of crayons and industrial air freshener. Ahead, the daycare doors were open. Grace caught a flicker of movement. A man in a dark suit, a woman in cream clicking away, two small forms huddled in a corner. The mop bucket squeaked softly as she walked. No one noticed her. The twins were smaller, up close than she'd imagined. Photos in tabloids and on company holiday cards always made them seem larger than life, glossy and contained. Here, their shoes were on the wrong feet. One pajama top was inside out. A hair clip dangled uselessly from the carpet. Grace paused in the doorway. The man in the dark suit of the bunch, she realized. Elliot Kane himself stood just outside, hands in his pockets, trying not to look like he wanted to bolt. The girls were a unit. Ivy, the one with the chipped purple nail polish, had her jaw clenched like she was biting back a scream. Isla, softer around the eyes, stared at the spot where the nanny had last been, as if replaying the exit on a loop. Grace had seen that look before, on her own face at 8 years old, when her mother's latest boyfriend walked out and took the rent money with him. No one was in the room with the twins. Staff had retreated to tidy shelves and straighten art projects while waiting for security to escort the nanny off the property. They hovered near the reception desk, trading low-voiced gossip and side-eyes. Grace's cart bumped the doorframe. Two small faces flinched toward her. She did not ask permission. She parked the cart quietly by the wall, slipped inside, and lowered herself onto the carpet a few feet away from them. For a moment, no one moved. She did not say, "It's okay," because it wasn't. She did not say, she didn't mean it, because she just sat, solid, present, a person who was not leaving yet. After a while, she reached out and laid her hand gently on Ivy's shoulder. The girl stiffened, then sagged, weight leaning into the touch like a plant toward light. Isla's eyes, glassy and big, flicked to Grace's face, as if checking to see if this stranger was real. Grace nodded once, a small, grounding gesture. The room's hum softened. The tension in Ivy's jaw unwound notch by notch. Her small body swayed. Isla's fingers loosened around the fox's tail. Within minutes, both girls had inched closer, their knees bumping Grace's leg, heads tipping until they rested against her. Their breathing evened. It was not magic. It was not a cure, but it was rest. And they took it. Outside the window, Elliot watched his daughters finally sleep. His throat burned. He had hired experts, specialists, people with degrees and invoices to match. None of them had managed what the janitor with the tired eyes and scuffed sneakers had done in 5 silent minutes. Something in his carefully controlled life shifted. He did not know yet that it would never shift back. The conference room on the top floor was built to impress. Floor-to-ceiling windows showed the city laid out like a circuit board. Screens glowed with charts. The table was long enough to land a small plane on. Grace sat in one of the chairs close to the door, hands on her knees, feeling the cushions swallow her in. She had never been in this room before. Cleaning staff weren't supposed to. Usually she saw it only in quick flashes through glass as the higher-ups filed in, all dark suits and cool laughter. Today, someone had typed her name on a visitor badge and buzzed her through. Elliot sat at the head of the table, tie loosened, sleeves rolled. Without the layer of distance the building usually gave him, he looked younger, more tired, less like a magazine cover and more like a man who had slept in hospital chairs. "Ms. Nolan," he said, "thank you for coming up. You told my supervisor I wasn't in trouble." She said, "That's not usually how these things start." A corner of his mouth almost lifted. "You're not in trouble, Mom," he said. "You're the first person my daughters have voluntarily fallen asleep on in months. That's the opposite of trouble." She had no idea what to say to that. "Okay," she said. He folded his hands on the table. "I'm looking for a new arrangement," he said. "Something that actually works for them. For us. I don't do arrangements, she said. I mop. I wipe down handrails. I make sure your offices don't smell like the real world. I want to hire you, he said. She blinked. I already work here, she said, unless you know something I don't. As their primary caregiver, he clarified. At least for a while, Simao, a trial. You seem to have a calming effect. He sounded like he was discussing an experimental investment. Grace swallowed a laugh. I don't know how to be a nanny, she said. I'm just a mom. To one kid. In a very different world. Maybe that's exactly what they need, he said quietly. Someone who isn't doing it for the resume. She shook her head. I can't, she said. I work shifts. I have a daughter. Maddie. She's 5. There's no one else to watch her if I'm not home. He nodded, as if he had expected this. There's an early learning center on the 43rd floor, he said. Small class sizes. Security. It was built for senior staff's kids. But we're expanding. I can arrange a place for your daughter. Scholarship. Full tuition. She would be safe. You could see her during the day. Grace stared at him. I clean bathrooms, she said slowly. You are offering to send my kid to a school that has a waiting list longer than my lease. It would be in exchange for your time and care, he said. I would pay you a full salary. Benefits. And you'd still keep your union seniority and facilities if it doesn't work out. It sounded too big, too dangerous. Like a deal you signed in blood. Images flashed through her mind. Maddie at a table with sturdy chairs and bright books. A teacher who wasn't burnt out. A lock on the door that actually worked. And another image. Sharper Maddie sitting on the edge of a fancy playground, watching her mother walk past, hand in hand with someone else's children. I can't leave her, Grace said, voice tight. She's all I've got right. I'm not asking you to leave her, Elliot said. I'm asking you to bring her into a place where she might have more than you did. The city glittered outside, indifferent. Grace thought about the apartment in Queens. The single bedroom. The stack of bills on the kitchen counter. The way Maddie's shoes had gotten tight and she'd pretended not to notice. She also thought about Ivy and Isla's faces as they had leaned into her shoulder, desperate for a silent, solid someone. The choice was not simple. Nothing that mattered ever was. She took a slow breath. I'll try it, she said. But on one condition. He raised an eyebrow. You don't get to decide what kind of mother I am, she said. Not to them, not to my own kid. You can fire me as an employee if you need to. You don't get to rescind me as family once they start believing in me. He hesitated, then nodded. Agreed, he said. Somewhere far below, elevators slid up and down, carrying other people through the predictable routines of their days. Grace Nolan's life, however, had just jumped tracks. The penthouse at the top of Kane Tower was breathtaking in that way, where you weren't sure if you were allowed to breathe. White marble floors, glass walls, art that looked more like geometry than feelings. A kitchen island the size of Grace's entire living room. Maddie squeezed her hands so hard their fingers ached. Do we have to take our shoes off? Maddie whispered. It's their house. Bug, Grace whispered back. We'll do what they do. The twins came skidding around the corner, socks sliding on the polished floor. Ivy wore a superhero cape over her dress. Isla had stickers on both knees. They stopped when they saw Maddie. For a heartbeat, no one moved. Then Ivy announced, You're little? Maddie lifted her chin. You're littler, she said. Isla's mouth twitched. I'm older by 3 minutes, she told Ivy, which was clearly an ongoing argument. Then, to Maddie, do you like foxes? Maddie nodded solemnly. I brought a bunny, she said, holding up a soft gray rabbit. He's nervous too. The ice cracked. Not melted. Not yet, but cracked. Elliot watched from the edge of the room as the girls eyed each other like kittens circling the same warm spot in the sun. For the first few days, everything was fragile. Grace moved through the penthouse like she was learning a new language. Where the light switches were, which drawer held the kids' forks, not the fancy cutlery that had never seen a real meal. What tone Ivy responded to when she was about to throw something, And what kind of silence meant Isla was about to start crying, not playing. Maddie attended the school upstairs, sitting at a round table with children who knew what an au pair was. In the evenings, she joined Grace and the twins for dinner in a dining nook that they slowly claimed as theirs. The first time Ivy and Isla asked to see where Grace and Maddie lived, Elliot hesitated. "It's not what you're used to," he said. "Is it a house?" Isla asked. "It's an apartment," Grace said. "Does it have stairs?" Ivy asked. Suddenly animated, "We've never had stairs." "Yes," Grace replied. "Lots of stairs. And a bath that squeaks," Maddie put in. "That settles it," Ivy declared him. Elliot looked at Grace. "If you're okay with it," he said, "I'll send a driver. Security will wait downstairs." Grace rolled her eyes. "They're three, not ransom notes," she said. "But fine, if it makes you sleep." That Friday, the black car pulled up outside Grace's building in Queens. It looked as out of place there as a diamond in a bowl of pennies. Ivy and Isla climbed the narrow stairwell slowly, one hand on the banister, as if going up into the clouds. The hallway smelled like old cooking and laundry detergent. Grace unlocked the door to 2B. Her apartment revealed itself in one small breath of space. One bedroom, a faded couch, a table with three mismatched chairs, a tiny kitchen where a pot of something with cinnamon and tomatoes simmered. "It's little," Ivy said. "It's loud," Isla said, as a neighbor's TV bleated through the wall. "It's home," Maddie said. She dropped her backpack on the couch, toed off her shoes, and padded to the kitchen to stir the pot like she'd done 100 times. Ivy sniffed the air. "What's that smell?" she asked. "Soap," Grace said. "And dinner." "And my crayons," Maddie added, rummaging in a drawer. There was no elevator, no second living room, no wall of glass. There were photos tacked crookedly to the fridge, Grace and Maddie at the zoo, both sunburned and laughing. A drawing of a house with a purple tree, a list of bills clipped under a magnet shaped like a donut. Ivy picked up a chipped mug. "Your cups don't match," she observed. "Sometimes things don't have to match to work," Grace said. They ate at the small table, knees bumping. The girls shared bread, sauce on their cheeks. Ivy declared the squeaking bathtub the best roller coaster ever when Grace turned the faucet on too fast and it shuddered. When night came, Grace pulled out the spare mattress from under her bed. It was thin, but it was what they had. She spread it on the floor, laid a worn sheet over it, and lined up pillows. "I'll take the couch," she said. "You three get the good spot." The girls argued and jostled until they ended up in a heap. Maddie in the middle, Ivy's foot on Isla's leg. The lights went out. The city hummed outside the window, softer here than downtown. "Does your mom read you a story?" Isla whispered. Grace lay on the couch, staring at the ceiling. "She tells me about when I was little," Maddie murmured, "and about what kind of big girl she hopes I'll be. Sometimes about the place she grew up, but only the good parts." "Tell us," Ivy whispered. Grace smiled in the dark. "Once upon a time," she said, "there were three girls who thought they needed perfect houses to feel safe. Turns out all they needed was a blanket and someone who would still be there in the morning. Within minutes, their breathing slowed. She stayed awake longer. In the chair he dragged into the corner, the security guard dozed, head bobbing. Grace listened to the sound of three small hearts trusting her with their sleep. She knew, as surely as she knew the rent was due on the 1st, that she was in trouble. On Monday morning, when the driver came to collect the twins, Ivy and Isla clung to the doorframe. "We don't want to go," Ivy said. "We like this house," Isla added. "It's a real house." Grace crouched down. "Your dad's waiting," she said. "You have your own beds there. Your toys." "Do you have stairs?" Ivy asked. "Yes," Grace said. "But these ones are special." "How?" Isla asked. "They lead to my front door," she said. "You can always climb them, as long as we all agree on the rules." "What rules?" Maddie asked, hovering nearby. Grace looked at her. "You never come without a grown-up, knowing," she said. "You don't run away. You don't scare people. And if you feel like you want to be here, you tell the truth about it." The twins considered. "Can we come back?" Isla asked. "Yes," Grace said. If your dad says it's okay, if it's safe, the door's not disappearing. Ivy's lower lip wobbled. Promise you won't forget us here, she whispered. Grace pulled her into a hug, then Isla too. Then somehow all three girls with Maddie wedged in the middle. I couldn't forget you if I tried, she said. At the foot of the building, Elliot waited by the car instead of inside it. He watched his daughters spill out of the stairwell, hair messy, cheeks flushed, chattering over each other about squeaky baths and stairs and non-matching cups. Did you have a good time, he asked. Ivy nodded so hard her curls bounced. Grace's house is real, she said. Is ours fake, he asked lightly. It's pretty, Isla said, but it doesn't smell like sauce. He laughed despite himself. Grace came down behind them, shoulders squared, eyes soft. Thank you, she said quietly. For what, he asked. For letting them see that homes come in more than one size, she said. Not everything was easy. Grace set a rule the second week. From 3 to 5, she told the girls, no screens. Ivy's gas could have powered the building. You can't do that, Ivy said. We always get cartoons. Screens make your brain tired, Grace said. These hours are for other work. What kind of work? Isla asked warily. Grace dumped a pile of clean laundry onto the rug. This kind, she said. Maddie snorted. Mom's real mean. She told the twins. Just wait till she introduces you to vacuuming. They sorted socks. Tiny hands paired small identical shapes. They matched colors, folded shirts. Grace turned it into a game. If someone found two that matched, they got to toss them into the basket like a tiny victory. Later, they rolled cookie dough into imperfect balls, flour-dusted noses, sugar-coated fingers. Elliot arrived home early once and walked in on a flour explosion. What happened here, he asked, brows lifting. Work, Maddie said, deadpan. Labor laws might apply. You should call someone. He leaned against the doorway, watching Grace show Ivy how to crack an egg without shattering it. He had not been part of the daily rituals of his daughters' lives. Meetings, flights, grief, and fear had made convenient excuses. Grace's rule pulled him into the orbit. The girls ordered him to sit at the table, tie on an apron, and flip pancakes on Saturday morning. His first attempt came out burned on one side, raw on the other. This is a crime, Ivy declared, poking it with a fork. Trying is not a crime, Grace said. Burning the second batch might be. He tried again. The twins shrieked with delight when he flipped one without dropping it. Maddie clapped like he'd just closed a major deal. It was messier than anything he was used to. Sticky syrup on the table, batter on the floor, laughter echoing off the previously pristine surfaces. He didn't realize how much he'd missed this chaos until he found himself grinning like an idiot, spatula in hand. The first fracture in Maddie's brave little shell showed up quietly. One afternoon, Grace knelt to tie Ivy's shoe in the hallway. Loop it like a bunny ear, she said. Then the bunny runs around the tree, dives in the hole, and pulls. Ivy giggled, small fingers clumsy but determined. Isla sat on the bench, watching, thumb tucked against her lip. Her eyes were somewhere else. Did your mom teach you this? Grace asked gently. Isla's voice was very small. She used to tie them for me, she said. I don't remember her face when she did. Grace's heart pinched. She sat beside Isla and took her small hand, placing it flat against Isla's own chest. Close your eyes, she said. Isla obeyed. Do you feel that? Grace asked. That thumb. Yeah, Isla whispered. Sometimes faces get blurry, Grace said. But love stays there. It doesn't leave when people's bodies do. It changes shape, that's all. Isla opened her eyes. Does it hurt less when it changes, she asked. Not always, Grace said honestly. But it gives you something to hold on to when the hurting feels big. From the doorway, Elliot watched, unseen. He had told his daughters, clumsily, that their mother was in the sky, in their hearts, all the floats and metaphors grief counselors suggested. He had never sat with them like this, letting the hurt be real without trying to fix it. Later that night, as he stood in the hallway outside the girls' room, he heard Isla whisper in the dark. Good night, Mom, she said. You can stay in my chest if you want. Maddie lay in the extra bed they dragged in, eyes open. Does she ever answer? Maddie asked. Sometimes, Isla said. I feel warm here, like there's a blanket inside. Grace, washing dishes in the kitchen, didn't hear. She only saw Maddie's silence at bedtime, the way she rolled to the edge of the mattress, back turned, as if making herself smaller. Later, Grace sat on the edge of Maddie's bed. "You've been quiet," she said softly. "I'm just tired," Maddie said. Grace knew that tone. It was the same one she used when she said, "I'm fine," with a headache pounding behind her eyes. "Talk to me, Bug," she said. "You're my person. I need to know what's going on in that head." Maddie stared at the wall. "I just don't want you to forget I was here first," she whispered. Grace's chest ached. "I could never," she said. "You are the reason I know how to love anyone else. Loving them doesn't take anything away from loving you." Maddie sniffed. "What if they start calling you Mom?" she asked. Grace swallowed. "Then we'll talk about how that makes you feel," she said. "We'll decide together where to draw lines, and we'll remember that the word is big enough to hold more than one kind of love." Maddie nodded, but the worry didn't leave her eyes entirely. The ground under this strange new family was still moving. The asthma attack came on a Thursday night. Grace was sorting laundry in the twins' playroom, fingers moving on autopilot, mind wandering through lists of things to do. Order more snack packs, schedule Maddie's next checkup, call the landlord about the weird rattle in the radiator. In the next room, cartoons murmured. Elliot had been called into a late video meeting. The girls had negotiated for one extra show. A sound cut through the noise, a cough, then another, then a hitching, wheezing sound that made the hair on Grace's arms stand up. "Maddie," she called. No answer. She dropped the shirt in her hands and ran. Maddie sat on the rug, back hunched, small hands clawing at the front of her shirt. Her eyes were wide, frightened. Each breath sounded like it was scraping through a straw. Grace's heart lurched. "Where's your inhaler?" she asked. Already scanning the room, Maddie shook her head, panic rising. "We used the last one." Grace remembered, cold dread washing over her. "I meant to pick up the refill. I meant to." She scooped Maddie into her arms. Ivy and Isla stared, frozen. "Ivy, hit the call button on the wall," Grace said. "The big red one. Now." But Isla was already moving. She tore down the hallway, bare feet slapping against the floor. "Dad," she screamed. "Dad, Maddie can't breathe." The bedroom door flew open. Elliot emerged, hair rumpled, eyes sharp. "What happened?" he demanded. "Attack!" Grace gasped, cradling Maddie. "No inhaler. ER. Now." He didn't hesitate. "Get in the car," he said. He grabbed his keys, barked one command to the startled security guard, and took the stairs two at a time. Grace ran beside him, Maddie's weight light and terrifying in her arms. Ivy and Isla clung to each other, following as far as the elevator doors before the guard gently steered them towards shoes and coats. In the garage, Elliot slung himself behind the wheel of his sedan instead of sliding into the back of the town car. Grace slid into the back seat with Maddie. "Stay with me, Bug," she said, voice shaking. "In, out. I know it hurts. I'm here." Maddie's fingers dug into her arm. "I'm sorry, Grace whispered. "I should have refilled it. This is my fault." Elliot's hands were steady on the wheel, but his knuckles were white. "The only fault here is the universe being unfair," he said. "We deal with what we has now. What we have." She might have corrected him under other circumstances. Siren lights flickered in the distance as they pulled into the ER drop-off. Inside, everything went fast and slow at once. Nurses, bright lights, questions asked and answered. A mask over Maddie's face. Machines beeping quietly. When the immediate crisis had passed and Maddie was resting in a small cubicle, Grace slid down the wall outside, legs giving out. She pressed her palms into her eyes. "I'm supposed to keep her safe," she said. "All the time. That's the deal." Elliot sat down across from her. His expensive suit looked out of place on the plastic chair. His tie hung askew. For the first time since she'd met him, he looked like just another parent in a hallway, stripped of title and power by the sight of a child struggling to breathe. "I remember sitting like this," he said quietly. after the accident, watching machines breathe for my wife. She looked up. I couldn't fix it, he said. Money couldn't fix it. Connections couldn't fix it. All I could do was sit and listen and be grateful for every sound. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees. You forgot one prescription refill, he said. On a day you were looking after 3 small human hurricanes and trying to learn a new life. That does not cancel out everything else you've done right. Grace shook her head, eyes burning. I'm her mother, she said. The bar is higher for me. He nodded. I know, he said. I feel it too. Every time the twins look at me like I might vanish next. But if we spend all our time punishing ourselves for not being perfect, we miss the chance to actually be present. The hallway hummed with quiet. In the room behind them, Maddie's chest lifted and fell in even rhythm. Thank you for driving, Grace said eventually, for not freezing. I wanted to, he admitted, but Isla looked at me like I was the only adult available. He gave a half smile that was more pain than humor. Terrifying feeling, he added. She laughed once, shaky. Welcome to my base state, she said. For a moment, they just sat there. 2 exhausted parents on cheap chairs, carrying different backgrounds and the same heavy love. Celeste arrived the next day. She swept into the penthouse like a cold front, coat draped over her shoulders, heels precise on the marble. Grace, back from the hospital with a sleepy Maddie, found her in the living room. You must be Grace, Celeste said, eyes flicking up and down her thrift store jeans and tired face. And the little one. She smiled at Maddie, but there was something calculating in the tilt of her head. I'm Celeste Marlowe, she said, Elliot's aunt. Grace shifted Maddie on her hip. Nice to meet you, she said. Celeste's gaze lingered on the girl's hospital bracelet. I heard there was quite a scare, she said. Asthma, was it? Yes, Grace said cautiously. And you neglected to obtain her medication on time, Celeste said. That must have been frightening for everyone. Grace's jaw clenched. We got her help, she said. She's stable. But what if it had been worse, Celeste asked, voice smooth. What if it had been one of the twins? Before Grace could answer, Elliot walked in. Aunt Celeste, he said, a warning threaded through the politeness. This isn't the time. On the contrary, Celeste said, it's exactly the time. Mistakes happen. Of course. I'm sure Miss Nolan is doing her best, but the optics of a janitor with a medically vulnerable child living in your home, caring for your daughters unsupervised. She is supervised, he said. By me. Celeste raised an eyebrow. Yes, she said. Between meetings and investor calls and crisis management, you can barely supervise your own sleep schedule. She turned to Grace. You seem like a kind girl, she said. You've clearly bonded with Ivy and Isla, but kindness is not the same as capacity. When you are gone, and you will be, eventually, Mom, people like you always are, they will still bear the scars. Grace's hands tightened around Maddie's small body. What exactly are you suggesting, Elliot asked. I'm suggesting that if you cannot provide a stable framework for them, Celeste said calmly, the court might consider an alternative guardian. Someone of their own blood, someone who understands the world they belong to. You'd take them, Grace asked. Stunned, Celeste gave a tight smile. I would protect them, she said. From chaos, from sentimentality dressed up as salvation. Elliot's mouth opened, then closed. Aunt, he began. She held up a manicured hand. I care about your reputation, she said, and theirs. Right now, the story is a tragic widower doing his best. If you continue like this, if something happens to those girls under the care of a janitor and her child, the story changes. She picked an invisible piece of lint from her sleeve. I will not watch this family name drag through the gutter again, she said. Not after what your father did to it. The old shame slid between them like a knife. Grace felt suddenly like she was intruding on a history she hadn't agreed to inherit. She looked at Elliot. He seemed torn, jaw tight, eyes flicking between her and Celeste in some invisible calculation in the air. I need to think, he said finally. Celeste smiled, victorious. Do that, she said, but not too long. Judges like prompt action. She left, her perfume trailing behind her like a warning. Grace stood in the silence she'd left. So that's how it is, she said quietly. It's more complicated than Elliot started. Then blood, she asked. Then money, then what other people think when they look up at this building. He flinched. I didn't say you didn't have to, she said. She shifted Maddie to her other hip. I grew up watching my mother choose men over stability, she said. Choose appearances over my safety. I promised myself I would never put my kid in a house where the floor could disappear overnight. He looked pained. I'm not disappearing, he said. But you might let someone else rearrange the walls, she replied, and my daughter would still fall through the cracks. He reached for her. Grace, I need to protect her, she said. From this, from being a footnote in someone else's story about damage control, she turned away, heart splitting, and went to pack. She did not make a speech. She folded Maddie's clothes in the bedroom they'd been using. She took the rabbit from the nightstand and tucked it into the bag. She gathered drawings from the fridge, some of which belonged to girls who weren't hers. Maddie watched from the doorway, eyes too big. Are we leaving? Maddie asked, voice small. Yes, Grace said. We'd always planned to go home someday. Bug. We just thought someday would be later. Because of me, Maddie asked. Grace's heart stuttered. No, she said quickly, because this house was never really ours. It was a stopover. A shiny, confusing stopover. She knelt and pulled Maddie into a hug. I will never leave you for someone else's kids, she whispered. If I leave, it's because staying would hurt you more in the long run. Maddie nodded against her shoulder. The twins found them in the hallway. Suitcase, backpacks, the international symbol for endings. No, Ivy said instantly. No, no, no. She flung herself at the suitcase, trying to wrap her small body around it. Isla grabbed Grace's leg, fingers digging in. You can't go, Isla sobbed. You're our real mom. Grace's throat closed. I'm not, she said desperately. You have a mom. She loved you first. I'm just someone who stays, Ivy said. You stay. Everyone else leaves. Their tears soaked her jeans. Their little bodies shook. Maddie stood a few feet away, fists clenched, tears on her cheeks. She did not reach for Grace. She folded herself inward as if making room. Grace pried one twin off the suitcase, then the other, hugging each in turn. I love you, she said. That doesn't vanish just because I'm not in this apartment. You are allowed to be angry at me. You are allowed to miss me. But you have a father. He is not leaving. He lets people leave, Ivy said bitterly. Grace swallowed. Sometimes grown-ups take longer to figure out what matters, she said. Sometimes they listen to the wrong voices. But I've seen him at that hospital. I've seen him burn pancakes for you. The love is real, even when the choices are messy. She kissed their damp foreheads one by one. Then she picked up the suitcase and walked toward the elevator. At the end of the hallway, Elliot stepped out of his office. He took in the scene, the girls on the floor, Maddie's stiff shoulders, Grace with the bag, and something in his face crumpled. Grace, he said. She met his eyes for one brief, aching second. Then the elevator doors closed. A week later, the penthouse felt like a hotel someone had forgotten to check out of. The toys stayed where they were put. The dishes were washed by people who did not hum while they worked. The girls went to daycare and came home and watched their allotted screens and ate what was on their plates without throwing it. They did not scream anymore. They also did not laugh the way they had in the kitchen when flour flew and pancakes burned. Elliot moved through his own home as if it were a particularly well-appointed office. His days blurred into calls and charts and empty rooms. Celeste was relentless. She sent texts about lawyers, emails with suggested talking points for if the press got wind of the transition. He ignored most of them. He told himself he was considering his options, being pragmatic, buying time. Really, he was stalling. Because every scenario that ended with his aunt's neat version of a proper family felt like sandpaper on his skin. On a gray Tuesday, his phone rang with an unfamiliar number. This is Elliot, he answered. Mr. Kane, a man's voice said. This is Frank. I'm the landlord for 2B, over on 71st and Ditmars. You left me a card. Said to call if, well, this seemed like a call the rich guy situation. Elliot's heart jumped. Is Grace okay, he demanded. Far as I can tell. Yeah, Frank said, but I got 3 little girls sitting in my hallway right now. One of them's yours, I think. They say they're waiting for Grace. She's at work. They look scared and a little too determined for my taste. Elliot was already grabbing his jacket. I'm on my way, he said. He barely remembered the drive. He only registered blowing through a yellow light and the way his hands shook on the steering wheel. The building at Ditmars looked smaller than it had in the photocopied lease Grace had signed months ago. It was realer, too. Streaks of old rain on the brick, a chipped door buzzer. Frank met him in the hall, leaning in a doorway. They wouldn't go back outside, he said, and I don't feel like being the guy who tells Kane's kids to stop crying. At the end of the hall, outside apartment 2B, 3 small forms huddled together. Maddie sat against the wall, knees drawn up. Ivy and Isla flanked her, each holding one of her hands. Tear tracks shone on their cheeks. When they saw him, Ivy's chin jutted. We came to get her, she said, voice wobbly but fierce. You let her go. So we came. Maddie looked guilty. I told them where the stairs were, she said, and that the door says 2B. I didn't mean to make trouble. I just couldn't breathe in there. Couldn't breathe. Isla raised something in her hand. It was a stuffed bunny, or half of one. The soft gray rabbit had been neatly cut down the middle. One half stayed with Maddie, the other Mom. Now ragged where the cut had been, sat in Isla's palm. If we share him, Isla said, no one is the outsider. Everyone has the same. In Maddie's other hand was a piece of paper, crumpled, but intact. She held it up. 5 stick figures stood under a wobbly rectangle of a roof. The tallest one wore what was clearly meant to be a tie. The smallest 3 had wild hair. Over their heads, in shaky letters, someone had written, Mom, Dad, Maddie, Ivy, Isla home. Elliot stared. The hallway blurred for a second. In their minds, the family tree had already been redrawn. What if Grace doesn't want us anymore, Ivy whispered. So softly he almost didn't hear. Elliot knelt. She loves you, he said. All 3 of you. She left because I made it unsafe for her to stay. Not because you did something wrong. Maddie's eyes filled again. I thought if we left, she wouldn't have to choose, Maddie said. But I still feel like I'm messing everything up. Elliot shook his head, feeling something heavy dislodge inside him. This is not on you, he said. Any of you. I'm the grown-up. I'm the one who is supposed to choose, and I chose wrong. He took the drawing carefully, as if it might break. We're going home, he said. All of us, he added. But first, we're going to wait for Grace. Together. And I'm going to tell her that if there's a court case, it won't be about taking you away from her. It'll be about keeping all 5 of us in the same picture. The girls looked at him, uncertain. Promise, Isla whispered. He nodded. I'm done letting other people define what our family is supposed to look like, he said. We get to decide that. The door to 2B opened. Grace froze in the doorway, tote bag slipping down her arm. Her gaze swept over the scene. Girls. Elliot. Half a rabbit, the drawing in his hand. Her shoulders sagged. I knew you'd show up here eventually, she said. Yeah, he said. I'm just sorry it took the 3 bravest members of this family to get us all in the same hallway. He stood. We need to talk, he said. She crossed her arms. If this is another version of It's Complicated, it is, he said, but not the way you think. He turned to Frank. Mr. Landlord, he said, do you mind if we borrow your hallway for a family meeting? Frank shrugged. As long as nobody breaks the fire alarm, he said. I'm good. They sat on the worn carpet, kids between them, drawings spread out like a treaty. I've been an idiot, Elliot said. Grace opened her mouth. He held up a hand. Not just garden variety idiot, he said. Legacy idiot. Image idiot. Letting my aunt's fear of shame and my father's mistakes run my decisions. I let that fear make me hesitate when I should have stood between you and her with both hands up. He looked at the girls. When you left, he said to Grace, I told myself I was giving you space to make your own choices. Really, I was hiding from the fact that I'd already made one and it was cowardly. He tapped the drawing. They're ahead of us, he said. They've picked their family. I'd like to catch up. Grace's eyes were wet. You can't just say that because you feel guilty, she said. This isn't a temporary fix, Elliot. This is my daughter's life. Their lives. I know, he said. That's why I'm not offering you a job. I'm asking you to come home. Not as staff, as us. He grimaced. That sounded better in my head, he muttered. But you get the idea. Maddie slid closer to Grace. I want to stay where they are, Maddie said, surprising herself. Even if it's fancy, even if Celeste looks at me like I'm dirt on her shoe, as long as you're there. Grace's heart twisted. They're going to talk, she told Elliot. People like your aunt, the investors, they'll say you lost your mind, that you replaced a perfectly respectable future with a messy woman and her kid. He smiled, a little crooked. They already say I lost my mind, he said. Might as well give them a better story to gossip about. The girls laughed, relief bubbling up. He sobered. I can't promise I won't mess up again, he said. I probably will. I can promise there won't be any more pretending you're just an arrangement. Celeste can keep her lawyers. We'll find our own. He reached out, palm up. Grace, he said, voice softer. Come home, please. She looked at his hand, at Maddie, leaning into her side, at Ivy and Isla, clutching their half-rabbit between them, at the drawing that had 5 stick figures under a not-quite-straight roof. She thought of her mother's revolving door of boyfriends, how she had never been asked what she wanted, how she had always felt like luggage, not family. She thought of the way Ivy had fallen asleep on her shoulder, of Isla's small hand on her chest, feeling her own heartbeat, of Maddie sharing her bunny. She took a breath. I'm not giving up my apartment, she said. It stays as a backup, as a reminder that we had a life before you. Deal, he said. And I won't let anyone, not your aunt, not your board, not you tell Maddie she doesn't belong in whichever room she walks into. She added, also a deal, he said. She put her hand in his. Then she said, I guess I'm coming home. Celeste did not take it well. She called Elliot into a corner office 2 days later, slammed a thick packet of papers onto the table, and said, you cannot be serious. The guardianship petition is shredded, he said. You'll regret this, she said. Probably, he replied, but I'd regret losing them more. She stared at him. You are throwing away everything we rebuilt after your father's scandal, she said. For what a feel-good story. A woman with no pedigree and her sick child. He thought of Grace kneeling in the hospital hallway, of Maddie's fierce little chin, of Ivy and Isla's arms around their shoulders. For a family, he said, not the one you would have written for me, the one that actually exists. For a moment, Celeste's composure cracked. You think I had a family, she asked, voice brittle. I had a surname and a list of expectations. That's not the same. He blinked. I'm not your enemy. Aunt Celeste, he said, I'm just choosing not to repeat the parts of our history that hurt. She lifted her chin. Then I hope, for their sake, she said, you're better at it than your father was. She left him with the echo of her heels and the faintest hint that under all that steel, there was a small, lonely girl who had never been chosen for herself either. 6 months later, the Kane Foundation launched a new initiative. A press release went out about community-centered early childhood development and integrity-driven investment in the next generation. Reporters quoted Elliot. Stock tickers barely flickered. The real story was harder to put on paper. Grace Nolan, once the janitor who slipped under the radar with her mop bucket, now ran a program that trained caregivers and parents in the kind of connection no nanny manual taught. She spent part of her week in community centers like the one she'd grown up near, part in the glass classrooms of Kane Tower, her feet planted in both worlds. Maddie, now 6, marched into the penthouse like she owned it. Because in a way, she did. Her drawings covered the fridge, Her laughter echoed off the walls. Ivy and Isla, 4 now, still had meltdowns, still fought over toys, still tested every boundary. The difference was there were more arms to catch them when they fell. One Saturday morning, the penthouse smelled like burned sugar and coffee. Elliot stood at the stove, flipping pancakes. "They're a little dark," he admitted. "They're perfect," Ivy lied, dumping syrup over hers. "They're brave," Isla said, picking at the edge. Maddie took a bite. "They taste like you tried," she declared. "That's my favorite flavor." Grace leaned in the doorway, watching them. The balcony outside had changed. Where once there had been sleek, empty stone, there was now a row of mismatched planters, terracotta paw, a metal bucket, and at the end, a battered black suitcase. Its lid removed, drainage holes drilled through the bottom, filled with soil. Daisies and ferns spilled over the edges. A small metal tag hung from the handle bracket. "Not perfect, but ours, family." After breakfast, the girls tumbled out onto the balcony, chasing bubbles. "Careful with the suitcase garden," Grace called. "She's sensitive." "She?" Elliot asked. Grace shrugged. "She carried our whole lives once." She said, "She's earned pronouns." He slipped an arm around her waist. "Any regrets?" he asked. "Tons," she said lightly. "Wrong turns. Hard days. But not about this." Maddie pressed her face into the daisies, inhaling. "This one's Maddie," she announced, pointing at a particularly stubborn plant that had pushed up through a crack in the old plastic. She grew even when there wasn't much room. "Ivy is the wild one," Ivy said proudly, pointing at a tall, tangling stem. "She goes everywhere." "Isla is this one," Isla said, touching a small, sturdy bloom. "She's quiet, but she sticks." "What about Mom?" Maddie asked. They all looked at Grace. She pointed at the deepest roots. "I'm the dirt," she said. "I hold you up." They groaned. "That's so cheesy," Ivy said. "That's so true," Elliot murmured. He kissed her temple. The city buzzed far below, unaware of the small miracle happening dozens of floors above, of a man who had chosen messy love over polished emptiness, of a woman who had dared to bring her whole, imperfect self into a world that told her she didn't belong, of 3 little girls who had decided that family was something you drew yourself, even if your lines wobbled. On the balcony, the plants moved gently in the breeze. In the kitchen, 4 plates sat in a haphazard stack, streaked with syrup. In the living room, a crayon drawing of a house hung slightly crooked on the wall. Under it, in colorful, uneven letters, someone had written, "Home," and for once, nobody in that room doubted what it meant.